just having an off-air conversation about California. Hey, a couple of things about that. I was going to mention this later in the program, but I've got to mention it during this segment because the movement. Do you know that 1/3 of the people surveyed in California support leaving the union, and that number may only be growing. But what I want to do is mention this, what they're calling it, Cal Exit, in a couple of minutes. It's 8:22. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com, because there's a few things we have to note about that state. And it's, first of all, they all, the refugees will all come here and plant Japanese yew so they can kill off the elk. Well, they're all environmentalists, but it looks pretty, don't you know? You got to realize they're the people who are coming here and planting that stuff. Native Idahoans don't do it, right? It's 8:23. Bill Colley with you now on Top Story. 33 on our way somewhere into the 40s today, and tomorrow into the 40s, and then Thursday, we may get into the 50s, so the meltdown will continue, and that means some people will still have impassable roads. Just a quick note, I wanted to mention our friend Dr. Christine Pickup. If you're listening to the program this morning, hallelujah, and thank you. But if you're struggling with listening to the program, this is a good person to call. She's a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. And she'd like to remind you there certainly are many obvious choices for hearing health care, but why would you choose Mount Harrison Audiology? Well, compassion. Dr. Pickup and her staff pride themselves on caring for each individual with customized and personal treatment plans. Mount Harrison Audiology cares about your health goals and will work with you to provide the best possible care. Mount Harrison Audiology, for your appointment today, the number 208-312-0957. That's 312-0957. Just a couple of quick notes about California, and then I want to get my guest take on this too as well, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. It's a name familiar to all of you. California's secession shows states' rebelliousness. This from Timothy Filan at the Washington Times today. Before the election, he writes, California liberals were still content to see themselves as first among equally enlightened states and as the incubator for the nation's next generation of Democrat stars, from Gavin Newsom, who's the ex-husband of Kimberly Guilfoyle, to newly minted U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, to former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villagrosa. And then, of course, Hillary Clinton lost, and the writer says, a recent Reuters Ipsos poll showed Californian support for secession at a remarkable 32%. That's 12% higher than 2 years ago, and, of course, 18 percentage points away from a majority. America's largest collection of liberals gets its own sanctuary country with open borders, free health care, free drugs, free education, free abortions, free bicycles, generous pensions, and a 55% corporate tax increase to pay for it all. Which means, of course, there won't be anybody doing business there any longer. And then I have this, also from the Washington Times. Jessica Chasmer, the writer. A financial report issued by state auditors finds that the state of California is in the red by $127.2 billion. So I guess we'll have to pay off their debt before they secede. Please, we're leaving, but can you handle our bills for us? The report says the state's negative status increased that year, largely because it spent $1.7 billion more than it received in revenues. Oh, well, we all do that with our credit cards, right? Just, if you're making $60,000 a year, why not, get $180,000 in credit card debt and then ask someone else to take care of it? And then, of course, here's the story about the Japanese yew being planted, killing animals. And again, this is for the new housing developments being built for the California refugees. Not all of them bad people. Some of them coming here are literally looking for some liberty in their lives. But I wanted to share all of those things this morning. And if they were to leave the union, California has more than a tenth of the population of the country. So when it comes to national debt, they're probably on the hook for $2.2 trillion of that. Just saying. And then you add that to the remarkable deficit they rang up on the statewide level this past year. It's 8:26. Steve Millington in the studio with us. You got me started on this a couple of minutes ago.
Sorry about that, Bill. I didn't mean to do that to you. It's interesting, and you look at the latest number that they have to have a voter petition, and a referendum, I think, is what they call it in California and probably across the country. They have to have a minimum of, it's either 650 or 700,000 validated signatures in order to get this secession.
Can they be illegal voters?
It's California. The last I heard was that they were up over 450,000 signatures, and this has been maybe a couple of weeks ago. So they are rapidly approaching the threshold where they can get the the vote on the ballot. And if I remember right, it would be a 2018 general election ballot. So we got 20 months before that's going to happen. But it's interesting. There was a sidebar piece this morning on Dredge Report about pensions, state pensions that are in trouble. And keep in mind that public pensions, I used the wrong term, public pensions. Part of the problem with public pensions is, you see, they are a defined benefit plan, not a defined contribution plan. Now, most of us in the non-public environment, the real world, we make a defined contribution to a
Sure.
retirement plan and hope for the best as an outcome. In a public employee environment, the contribution is predefined. We get this much, period. And I don't know all of the particulars in Idaho, but it is an interesting dynamic. It is the number of years of service times 1.5 times the average of your last 5 years' salary. So let's say that you were a public employee for 30 years. 1.5 times that would be 45, and your average pay was $50,000. So you would get 45% of $50,000 the rest of your life. That's a pretty healthy retirement package. Now, you're not going to be able to live in a mansion on high, but it's a pretty healthy retirement package. It's a defined benefit plan. What happens? The article that I read used CalPERS, the California Public Employee Retirement Plan, and Ohio. Somehow they completely skipped over Illinois, but they used California and Ohio, and they said both of them are changing the uh, actuarial factor to determine how long the plan is going to work, with the hope that the market, either the stock market or the bond market, will catch up with them and make them whole at some point in the future.
I'm going to throw a curveball at you,
Wow.
by the way, in the next half hour because I saw something after I sent you the agenda today coming out of the Deseret News about Mitt Romney, but we'll get to that in the next half hour.
Okay.
Steve Millington is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, joining us in studio with me, Bill Colley, on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. 31 at 8:30, and of course, snow this morning is clear indication that winter's not quite yet over, and that may mean that you're still struggling to heat the home, and you may have some issues with the efficiency of that furnace. Call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric in Burley. They'll come out and get the job done right, get the repairs done, and they'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free, cozy winters are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley, or call them. The number 678-0459. That's 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. And yes, summer will follow spring, and spring might be coming, at least a tease of it, next week. We'll get back to our guest in just a moment. Steve Millington is in studio with us. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. It's coming up at 8:34. We're at 33. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. Just a quick note, I wanted to mention the good folks at Waddell & Reed this morning. This is an investment firm that's been in business since 1937. Now, I can do the math. 80 years, right? 80 years. They're one of the oldest firms to offer mutual funds, and Waddell & Reed owns and manages two mutual fund families. Investing is done by a conservative nature. This is a company that knows what it's doing, well, obviously in business 80 years. Waddell & Reed will take a planning approach and look at each piece of the puzzle you have as a client and help build proper expectations. Waddell & Reed will build those plans around your needs and goals and help you manage money. At Waddell & Reed, they take planning personally. So Steve Millington, I read that Deseret News did an interview with Mitt Romney, and he's leaving open the door because if Orrin Hatch were to retire, Mitt Romney may be running for U.S. Senate
From the state of Utah.
from Utah. Of course, he's got residences in Massachusetts and Utah and probably New York because he had a business there too. But
At the present time, as I understand it, he is his domicile, his residency is Park City, Utah. And so that would not surprise me a great deal if he decided to do that.
you've also heard John Huntsman's name.
I have heard John Huntsman's name on a couple of
So,
news radio
so,
shows.
so Chaffetz and Herbert have no option here of running for that seat.
I don't think Jason Chaffetz wants to leave his position in the House of Representatives. He has risen very quickly through the hierarchical order in the House, and that is so steeped in tenure that it's amazing that he has progressed as rapidly as he has. He is a kind of a busybody back there.
I would think that Romney would be a shoe-in number one. Certainly, no Democrat could challenge him in Utah, and most Republicans wouldn't want to. But he would be instantly, when he would get to Washington, it would almost be as if he were a longtime incumbent, even as a rookie senator.
I was going to say he would not be viewed as being a rookie or a quote freshman unquote. He would bring with him some considerable status, even though from a tenure standpoint he might be brand new. I think he could progress very quickly back there. The name recognition, huge benefit,
No, I got
huge.
here's my theory of Romney. I was telling you off air that he's not viewed by a lot of conservatives as being very conservative. In 2008, he was considered to be the most conservative of the group.
Mm-hmm.
People who didn't want John McCain and some of the others were backing Romney, and they overlooked Romney Care from Massachusetts. But he's a very polite man, and I think because of his politeness, he doesn't come off as being a strong conservative. And for that reason, and people are still angry that he lost the election in 2012.
I think there is some hesitancy on the part of many people. They can come up with all kinds of arguments about what happened at the end of the 2012, and then he just kind of dropped the ball. Their ideas, not necessarily mine. Um, I think that you have an interesting point when you say he is too polite. Um, uh, Romney is a genteel and a gentleman, and you're not going to find a lot of vitriol and hatred, and so he comes even though he's very sharp fella. I mean, he graduate from Harvard Law School and Harvard MBA simultaneously, and Dean's List in both situations. I mean, the guy's not stupid. Um, and besides which, he's got a pretty healthy checkbook. But
Yeah, not
it's
as big as the Donald.
no, not as big as the Donald. You're right. But he comes across as being a little too much milk toast. But he's not. He has firm conviction. He articulates them well, but he's not going
You
to
got to
be.
do a boxing ring against a former world heavyweight
Yeah, he
champion,
did.
and
He
he's a
did do
big
that.
man too.
Yeah, he did do that. Romney would be an interesting. That would be an interesting race to watch. The most critical thing here, however, is Orrin Hatch going to retire? That could be a very interesting. That'll be fun to watch.
One of the nicest things I ever heard about Orrin Hatch was back in the 1990s, and a buddy of mine was telling me that Orrin Hatch and his family owned a TV station in Utah, and he said it was the place everybody in the TV news business wanted to work because they treated people so well, which in broadcasting at the time in broadcast news and television, well, it still isn't the case. But we've got to take a short break. I don't mean to cheat the
Boy,
telephone
that
callers. We'll
that
get to them
comes
after
around
this.
fast, doesn't it?
Yeah. Don't mean to cheat the callers, but whatever topic, we've touched on a couple of things. They're allowed to give us a shout on the next segment of the program. But before we get to the break, you do have a big event coming up tomorrow.
Yep, we have
monthly
our
meeting.
monthly Republican meeting is Wednesday night at 7 o'clock in the Planning and Zoning Conference Room of the County West Building. We will be talking about the final preparations for our Lincoln Day banquet on February 25th, and we have a guest speaker coming in, and I've been so hung up on getting Lincoln Day squared away that I've forgotten who that is. Normally, we hold those meetings to an hour and 15 minutes, but we have a great opportunity to just visit and chat and talk about Republican things.
And of course, the Democrats out there think that Lincoln was one of theirs, but just keep in mind he was the very first Republican president.
That's right.
We've got more coming up with Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Committee. Bill Colley with you as well. On Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. We're at 31 on our way into the mid 40s. Our guest in studio, Steve Millington. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Committee. Just a quick note, tomorrow between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, we'll be joined by one of the medical pros from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. Dr. Tripp's office still looking for new patients. And the key here is they can generally doesn't mean always, but generally see you on the very same day if you call up as a patient and you have a medical issue, and it could be one of those things that's bordering on, pretty bad illness. We want to point out we do it every Wednesday. It gives you an opportunity to say hello to the doctor and ask a question or two. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. Steve and I were just talking about some of the problems we have with this country being so divided right now. There's a writer at sayanythingblog.com in North Dakota named Rob Port, and he says the left condones violence because they think they're fighting evil. In other words, if you're not one of them, uh, you're the worst kind of human being. Here's another one. Douglas Schoen, the former Clinton pollster in the Wall Street Journal, has a piece about how the liberals have actually been picketing the home of Charles Schumer, which is why Schumer's taken the approach he has. But it mentions that people like John Tester from Montana, he doesn't need to be seen as being too liberal as a Democrat. And some of these other U.S. senators are trying to run and hide for. And Joe Manchin should be a Republican for all intents and purposes. He is.
I think he will more and more move towards the Republican agenda. He knows that his seat in West Virginia is very, very vulnerable.
Right.
And he's going to take on a more conservative, more Republican looking approach in order to.
If I knew he was pro life, I'd vote for a guy like him. I really like him. And then I've got this from Eric Erickson. He says that these leftist women are promoting a general strike. He says, I guess that means no one's going to be making your sandwiches or cooking your dinner. He's trying to give them a little bit of a tweak there. And then here it is, a campus conservative group rejected at one school, Santa Clara University, because the liberals said it made them feel unsafe. Here you go. Daily Signal says liberals likely to use courts to thwart Trump agenda. In other words, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be cherry picking the courts they file suit against Trump for various issues.
And that, I think, to a large measure, is exactly what we're seeing with this immigration issue coming out of the federal district court in the state of Washington. Um, they can make all kinds of argumentation. Well, he was appointed by Bush. Yeah, well, let me tell you how we appoint federal district court judges. It is the pattern and practice for years now has been that the two senators from that particular jurisdiction will submit a list of acceptable candidates for federal court bench, and then the president can typically chooses from that list. Well, Patty Murray from Washington State submitted the list that I've forgotten the name of the judge in Washington. Shame on me. That particular judge was on that list. Robart.
Robart, yeah.
Okay. Was on that.
R-O-B-A-R-T, Robart. Yeah.
Was on that list. And so the judge was actually nominated, submitted by a Democrat senator. And the people say, well, why do you do that? Well, it's just been a way things have always been done kind of approach. So he's not, he may have been appointed by George W. Bush, but he's not conservative. He is a liberal jurist. Last night on one of the news shows, they were talking about, oh, he's such a great guy, and he did this, and he does that, and he does the other. And the final question from the host was, well, is he really conservative, or is he just a closet conservative? And the guest who was defending the judge just kind of sat there and didn't answer for a minute. And the host seized the moment and said, okay, fine, thank you, and got the answer he wanted. So the ruling today, the Washington State federal judge said this ban on immigration is illegal. It now goes to Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit has a series of judges, either 9 or 12, I don't remember the number, and one of them is in Hawaii, one is in, I think two of them are in California. So they will hear the arguments via teleconferencing.
This is why John McCain is trying to take a lot of, and Idaho would be included, move us into a new 12th Circuit because
exactly,
so we can avoid these left-leaning.
Exactly, and Crapo pushed for the same thing, and it died because Obama came in and he said, "There's no way that's going to happen. Forget it." We may see some movement on that, creating a 12th Circuit now that we have a Republican president, and we need it. We need it. But anyway, they're going to have their conference call. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that they are going to uh, support the Washington judge, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court. And given the Supreme Court is now deadlocked at 4-4, it is unlikely that the Supreme Court would rule any other way than 4 on this side of the fence and 4 on that side of the fence. And in the event of a tie from the Supreme Court, the lower court decision stands. So this thing could be pushed through on some technical legal issues, court issues. The big question in my mind, the immigration thing, maybe it could have been handled different, maybe not. Let's get a handle on who's coming in here and why, and so we get a proper arrangement and get it fixed. Uh, the thing that's really going to happen is that where is the confidence factor in our rule of law? Do we, with this kind of pitiful argumentation, do we destroy our foundation in the rule of law, and thereby we just one at a time or jointly or severally or refuse to follow the rule of law?
Well, a
And
lot of
that's
people have been taking that approach for years anyway.
but now you see we're reaching the point where it, number one, it's mainstream, and number two, it has a high profile visibility, and so why should I abide by those laws? They don't mean a thing.
We've got a caller with us. And just before we get to the caller, let me point out the telephone number 736-0300. Steve Millington, our studio guest. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Committee. Joining me, Bill Colley, on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. 10 minutes from 9 o'clock. And caller, you're up next.
Good morning, gentlemen. I just think the hypocrisy of everything is pretty frank, pretty in your face. When it's the Democrats that have lifted Lady Liberty's blindfold off, and now she looks at things depending on who people are. We need to put that blindfold back on so that justice system is for all. It doesn't matter who you are, how much you make, or whatever. It's the law that counts. And they keep breaking the law and making excuses because of their heart. Well, if that's the case, then change the law, then do it. Don't break the law under the guise of being a good person, because it's a bunch of baloney. We all know their motives on why they're doing this, and it has nothing to do with compassion.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. If we are jointly agree that it's a bad law, we have a process in place called the legislative process. The legislative branch of government, the law-making body of government, can change that law, and that now that the courts could still make a determination as to the constitutionality of the law, rather than simply being they call them creative judges. They want to rewrite laws and do it at the court level rather than the legislative level.
I've got something here. In fact, speaking of laws, the laws of grammar being tortured by Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago. The Chicago Tribune has this story. He appeared yesterday for a speaking engagement at Stanford, and he said when it comes to Democrats retaking power next year, quote, it ain't going to happen in 2018, unquote. Then he went on to say, quote, take a chill pill, man. You got to be in this for the long haul, unquote. So even some of these people are aware that that they're damaged goods for a long, long time.
And it's not getting any better. There was another article on Dredge this morning indicating that many Republican lawmakers are being targeted for protests. I can't remember. It was a California congressman, I think, who went to a town hall meeting, and he had to be escorted out of the meeting with a police escort.
Gosh, when the Tea Party was being noisy at these meetings, we were called insurrectionists
Yes.
and bigots and racists
Horrible
and dangerous.
people.
Now, funny how media has such a short-term memory on all of these things.
I would prefer to call that a selective
Right.
memory.
People reading my column today in the Times News will see exactly that because I talk a little bit about how
Yep.
we're going to hold Donald Trump's feet to the fire. But think about Benghazi, and I just bring up some points about that. But this is the thing: we're dealing with people out there who, while they scream about fake news, are trying to skew this, whether they be, uh, mainstream media and liberals, I guess, is being redundant, but they're trying to skew this in order to try and convince people. The past never happened, apparently.
Well, and they want to change the tone of the news, to skew it, as you used, to fit their purpose. And their purpose is not the betterment or the protection.
Well, again, getting back to what this guy from North Dakota said, they think the rest of us are evil.
Yeah.
So they believe that what they think is a self-evident truth, and by any means necessary, they're going to impose it on anyone else.
And their idea of diversity and inclusion exists until they're in charge, and then suddenly we don't want any diversion. We don't want any of this. Uh, uh, Everybody.
Well, they jump up and down about Steve Bannon advising the president, but then you had Al Sharpton, who's probably responsible for the deaths of 8 to 10 people because of his actions over the years. He was advising President Obama. He was at the White House twice a week. That was considered okay by these
That there was
people.
no problem. In fact, we hardly ever heard that he was there and on that regular basis and had President Obama's ear as often as he did. We never hear about it.
We've got a caller. Caller, you got to make this one quick because Steve still has some business to get to. Go ahead. You're on the air.
You bet. This is a quick one. You said they were trying to hold Donald Trump's feet to the fire. I think they ought to, because Donald Trump has fulfilled every one of his promises so far, except putting Hillary in jail.
Okay, but we can't do that until we get an attorney general, and they're dragging their feet on an attorney general for who knows whatever reason.
Daily Signal today pointed out too that Republicans have only actually passed 3 of his bills so far. So for all their tough talk over in the House and Senate, they're still a little timid.
They're not moving quite that fast.
We got a couple of minutes left. Lincoln Day is coming up, so it'll be about 3 weeks away,
Yep.
right?
February 25 at the Canyon Crest Event Center. Social hour starts at 6. Dinner starts at 7. We have got a long list of elected public officials who will be here. We have many of our state officials, the representative, the legislative people from District 23, 24, 25, some from 26. We're not sure about 27. We have not had confirmation yet from Scott Bedke, who is from District 27, but is our neighbor over in Oakley. We think that Brad Little will be here, Lawrence Wasden will be here.
All the people
Brandon
who actually
Wolf.
are running for office will be here.
Yeah, anybody who has expectations or appearances or desires.
Now, sometimes we need to be fair. Sometimes candidates will have conflicts because
Yes,
there's 44 counties and there's only a few weekends in February to have these Lincoln Day dinners.
and that's an issue. We had to reschedule our weekend because the weekend we chose had been pre-selected by another group, and so they said, no, we can't do that. Now, one thing we do in Twin Falls is we try to be as accommodative as we can. On that Saturday, there will be a breakfast. I'm sorry, a breakfast hosted by the Blaine County GOPs, then the Minidoka Cassia
We need to do
combined
everything we can to help out the conservatives in Blaine County.
in Blaine County. So they have a breakfast, and then they go to Burley for the Minidoka Cassia County, and they have a brunch, and then they come to Twin Falls for dinner that evening. So we get all of our elected officials and many good, solid Republicans will travel the circuit and hit Blaine County and then the mini Cassia region and then Twin Falls for dinner.
We should point out, though, even in Blaine County, Dale Everson did better in that race than I think most people would have thought he would do against a powerful Democrat.
Extremely powerful. And there's another side to that. It's kind of a strategic looking thing. By having Dale Everson run for that seat, it demanded then that, oh goodness, why can't I think of her name? The Democrat Senate minority leader. she had to stay home and campaign. She couldn't go around the rest of the state. She had to stay home and fight her turf battle.
Yeah.
So the 25th, mark it on your calendar. And
If people would like tickets, where do they go?
you can contact me or go to our website, Twin Falls Republicans. Um, we can put your name on the list. You can pay at the door, or you can use PayPal and get a prepaid ticket. So we expect to have a big crowd and a really good evening.
Want to thank Steve Millington for his time today, and thank you for
Thank you.
yesterday as
That
well.
was fun. Great. Everybody be careful out there. Those roads are goofy.
Yes, and a lot of lakes and ponds where there should be roads. We've got a short break. News is coming up in just a moment from Fox. One more hour with Bill Colley on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLI. We're up to 34, though, so it's going to switch over to rain. Not that you need it, but it just in case you don't like snow. We're going to have an option today.